About a year ago, whenever Brad talked to me about potentially coming to Texarkana, I did some research about the city so that I could find out a little about it and learn about what some of the perceptions of it were. Even today, I'm still learning about this city. I'm actually in a community leadership program called Leadership Texarkana. And once a month, we spend a whole day going out all around the city, learning about a whole bunch of different things. And there's one phrase that in all this research has continued to pop up over and over and over again. Texarkana, twice as nice. Maybe you've heard it before. And it's very clever because, see, we're two cities in one. And so, twice as nice, it's a nice, clever statement. And I think even recently I heard that there was some group or some organization or publication, someone ranked Texarkana as the second nicest city in the country. It's a nice accolade. And you know what? To be fair, since I've been here for about 5 months, I've really found that to be the case. People have been friendly to me and nice and kind. They wave at me in the mornings. They say good morning. They say hello. People will even stop what they're doing to answer my silly random questions. The biggest one that I had was, what did they call the Grim Hotel before it started to look so grim? It's usually the reaction I got, too. But people have been very nice to me, and it kind of got me wondering. Most people I meet know that I'm a pastor, or if they don't already know, they find out very shortly thereafter. So, of course, people are going to be nice to their pastor. But what about other people? Does everyone who comes to this church or this city receive that same nice treatment? And then it got me really thinking. Kindness, the kind of niceties and politeness that we offer people when we meet them, does that extend to everyone? Or just a certain type of person or a certain amount of people? And does it continue to last? Or is there an expiration date on that? Are we kind and nice to them only as long as they're right in front of us, but as soon as they leave the room or once we get behind closed doors, that transforms into something else? In thinking about all of these things, I really try to think, what is kindness? It's something we teach to the littlest of our children, all the way up to we still talk about it in adult Bible studies. And I think at the heart of it, kindness really is allowing the grace and the joy of God to flow through us in such a way that everyone around feels that love. Now, in our passage today, you'll see that there are these two men who are in it. Lazarus, who was poor, and then a rich man. And there's just a couple of differences between these guys. So the rich man has this beautiful, fine, ornate clothing that's made from the nicest of fabrics and the most expensive of colorful dyes. But Lazarus is clothed in sores that are unsightly, that ooze, that hurt. The rich man has a nice big house with a gate to protect his privacy and protect him from unwanted visitors, something that only the most affluent in the society would have been able to afford. Lazarus finds his home on the street outside of the rich man's gate. The rich man feasts every day with a table full of food, think Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas dinner, and has leftovers to spare. But Lazarus is malnourished, he's starved, and he desires even to have the food that falls from the table at the rich man's dinner. And then the rich man, upon his death, is buried, receives a proper ceremony, is probably laid in a nice ornate tomb, and has people come from all over the community to share beautiful eulogies about his life. But Lazarus, having nobody to care for him, upon his death, received no burial, received no tomb, no ceremony, and was just left in the street to the animals. Just a couple of differences between these two people. And so, obviously, these guys are from two different sides of the world. Two different social classes, two different circles of people and hangouts, two different lifestyles. So why would we expect the rich man to do anything or in any way to help Lazarus? After all, Lazarus was poor. He would never be able to repay back the kindness or hospitality that the rich man would be able to show. And after all, the rich man had his own family, his own close friends, his own employees and circle of influence to take care of. And yet, The rich man finds himself on the wrong side of eternity because he overlooked one fundamental similarity between him and Lazarus, one thing that he totally missed, something that was more important than whether or not they liked the same books, something that was more important than whether or not they had the same friend groups, something that was even more important than whether or not they rooted for the same college football team. He overlooked the humanity in Lazarus. He missed out on the chance to show him kindness, not because Lazarus did anything to deserve it, not because Lazarus would be able to repay him, but simply because he too was created in the image of God, simply because he too was someone for whom Christ came to die. Notice that in this story, the rich man who's got it all isn't named, and yet Lazarus, who has nothing and no body, is the one whose name we know. Clearly, Jesus wants us to see that this is a person. Now, kindness is a really funny thing. You ever go throughout a whole day trying to smile and wave and greet and ask how someone's doing to every single person you see in a whole day? It can kind of be exhausting. Sometimes people kind of leave a big church service almost with a feeling of trauma, especially if they're introverts, thinking, I said hi to 300 whole people. It can be exhausting. And it seems like a lot of work at oftentimes, and so we tend to be fairly selective of who we really show kindness to. Now, before we go thinking that this rich man is just a big, mean jerk without a nice bone in his whole body, no heart, no soul, think of the end of the passage. At the very end, he shares a very, very significant concern for his 5 brothers, and he implores Abraham, send someone to warn them that they may not find themselves in the same horrendous fate in which I found myself. And that's natural. It's natural to have that kind of concern for your family or for your very closest friends. But the problem is that the rich man stopped there. They and they alone were the only ones to receive that care and that kindness from him, and he turned a blind eye to everyone else. And so when he came upon someone like Lazarus, someone who probably needed that care and kindness far more than the 5 brothers, he was just overlooked. Sometimes we can get so focused and so used to zeroing in on the needs and the wants and the life of those who are around us and that we're used to, that we just totally miss out on the needs and the cares of those who are left on the outside looking in. So that begs the question of what could the rich man have done differently? How could he have shown kindness? Brad and I were talking about the parable this week, and he said, well, Greg, let's assume that this story went a little differently. How would it go if the rich man was a devout Christian who had strong faith and who followed Christ in all the ways that he could? Well, for starters, he wouldn't be in hell. And second, he would have never let Lazarus just die on his doorstep. That's probably the least nice thing I can potentially think of. See, sometimes kindness means extending a hand to someone who is in need, whether we know them or not. But it doesn't have to be an extreme example. Kindness doesn't always come at a cost. And you'll find that sometimes the things that we find the smallest, most insignificant, littlest, easiest things are the very things that could prove to be the biggest difference in someone's world. They're the things that could prove to have the biggest impact in someone's life. I think that offering dignity and respect to people is one of those very simple things that doesn't come at a cost to us and yet totally transforms someone else's day. Every time I read this parable, I continue to marvel at the fact that even in this surprising new situation where the rich man finds himself, he still treats Lazarus like a subpar person. When you read these conversations, do you notice that he doesn't once address Lazarus directly? Instead, he just assumes that Lazarus is some servant at Abraham's side meant to run errands for him or something. And so he says to him, send Lazarus to do this. Have Lazarus do that. I'm amazed that Lazarus keeps his mouth shut and doesn't ask God to turn the heat up on the dude. He's not being very nice to him. And boy, how many times have I seen that? How many times have I seen where people are viewed just as a position and not as an actual person? How many people who work in retail stores or in restaurants or various other jobs, when something goes horribly wrong that's beyond their control, they have to stand there while people unload all of their fury and wrath and anger at this one person? How many people walk around feeling invisible because people don't stop to ask them how their day is going? They don't say hello. They don't offer to pray for them. They don't even ask their name. They just go straight to, here's what I need from you, and I need you to do it now. Go ahead. Why are you still here? Get this done. Showing simple dignity and respect is something that can make all the difference in the world, something that can absolutely transform the worst of days into a shining, great day that they'll remember for years to come. And I think that one of the most compelling reasons for why we do this is because the love and care we have from Jesus Christ in our own lives, the grace and the kindness that He constantly shows us. Remember, kindness is all about letting the grace and the joy of God flow through us in such a way that everyone around feels that love. Now, one of the most powerful parts of this whole story wasn't read this morning. It comes in the 4 verses immediately following this parable. In Luke chapter 17, verses 1 through 4, Jesus talks about not being a stumbling block for other people. And I thought that really profound. And so as I was thinking about this parable, it brought my attention to last Sunday whenever I sat in the TNT Sunday School class, and I was listening to Dr. Brian Berry teach. And he was kind of giving like this quiz of different questions that we had to answer about ourselves. And one of the last questions was, what makes you afraid? Now, I could have been uber literalistic about it and said, the dark, or the ocean, or spiders. But I thought deeper, and I thought, what is it that really just shakes me to my core that I'm terrified of? And what I realized is that I am so afraid that I might one day be the cause of someone to lose their faith in the gospel. And I don't just mean that as a pastor. I mean that as a Christian. Just like how a waitress is a representative of the restaurant, or a salesman the representative of a retail store, or a teacher represents a school, so we as Christians represent the whole church. We represent the gospel message. We represent Jesus Christ. And people are watching. They're watching what we say, what we do, how we interact with other people. And they're judging whether or not there really is something to this gospel message, whether there really is something special and different about people who have the Holy Spirit residing within their hearts. The last thing I ever want to do is be the cause of someone to think that it's not real, to be the cause of someone thinking that God doesn't transform people. There's an illustration I really love that goes well with this message. You've probably heard it 618 times, but I'm going to say it anyway because I love it. It goes something like this. There was a woman named Ruth who was checking her mail one day. And as she was checking and sorting through her mail, she found an envelope that had her name and address on it, but there was no postage stamp and there was no return address. And so she opens it and she finds in it a letter. And she reads the letter. And it says, "Dear Ruth, I'm going to be in your neighborhood this afternoon, and I would love to drop by for a visit and see you again. Love, Jesus." And Ruth thinks to herself, wow, Jesus? Why would he come see me? I'm nobody special. I've got nothing to offer. And then it hits her. She's really got nothing to offer. She thinks about her empty kitchen cabinets and says, my goodness, I've got nothing to feed him. I've got to go out to the store and buy some dinner. So she grabs her purse, gets her pocketbook, counts the money that she's got, $7.40. Well, that's enough to get a sandwich. So she grabs her coat and runs out to go to the store. At the store, she grabs a loaf of French bread. She grabs half a pound of cold cut, some sliced turkey, and she grabs a carton of milk. She checks out at the counter, and what's left over from her $7.40 is 12 cents to last her till Monday. So she's got her grocery bag, and she's excited. All right, I'll have something to offer Jesus. And as she's walking down the street back to her house, she hears someone yell out, "Hey, ma'am, ma'am." She turns, and there's a gentleman who is in raggedy clothing, who doesn't smell too great, messed up hair, and he walks up to her and he says, "Ma'am, my wife and I just recently got laid off from our jobs and our house foreclosed, and we're living here on the street, and it's getting cold, and we're hungry. We're wondering if you could do anything to help us." And the woman said, Ruth said, I'm so sorry. I'm not very wealthy myself. I really don't have anything to give, and these groceries are for a very important guest who's coming to visit me today. And the man says, "Okay, I understand. No worries. Thank you anyway." And so he turns back, he goes to his wife who's sitting on the sidewalk against a wall, and he puts his arm around her shoulder to give her some warmth. And Ruth stops and thinks for a second and says, "You know what, sir, here. These groceries were for someone very important coming to see me today, but you have them." So she gives him the bag of groceries, and then the woman, the man's wife, says, "Thank you so much." And at that point, Ruth notices that she's shivering from the cold. And Ruth unbuttons her coat and says, "Here, I've got another one of these at home." So she takes her coat and puts it around the woman's shoulders. And she walks home, empty-handed, no coat, no groceries, but she's smiling all the way. And then she gets to her door, and then it really hits her. Again, I have nothing to offer Jesus. So she fumbles through her purse looking for her keys to her door when she happens to notice another letter in her mailbox. And she thinks, well, that's weird. Normally the mail doesn't run twice in one day. So she goes and she grabs it. Again, her name and address. No return address, no postage stamp. She opens it and there's a letter that reads, "Dear Ruth, it was great to see you again today. Thanks for the delicious meal and the beautiful coat. Love always, Jesus." So friends, what can we do? How can we show kindness? How can we show the love that is permeated through Christ and radiating and shining through us to a world that is broken and hurting and in need of that love and kindness and care? For starters, tomorrow's Veterans Day. You can find someone who served. Shake their hand and say, "Thank you so much for your service. We are so blessed for what you have done." In your bulletins, there is an insert from an organization called For the Sake of One. And on it, there are pictures of 3 kids who are in the foster care system. Take it and just put it on your icebox. And each day, pray for those kids. Pray that they may find a home. Pray that they may know that they are loved. Pray that each day may be made with some random act of kindness from someone who is willing to go out of their way to love them. Or if you want to do more, there's instructions on how to do more and support and give. What if people didn't have to be told that we're Christians? What if they just knew it from the way we acted, from the way we talked to people and greeted people? What if someone's day was made just because we said good morning to them and stopped to take just a minute to hear what's on their heart? Friends, what can we do? We can let the joy and the grace of God flow through us in such a way that everyone feels that love. Amen.